The question for the podcast is, do we include any protected FMLA, CFRA, or PDL time taken in the 1,250-hour eligibility calculation during the 12-month look-back period?
So there's two different criteria that we address when we're looking at eligibility for FMLA. And remember that for FMLA, CFRA, ADA, any of your state or federal regulations, there's always three questions you're asking. Number one, is the company and the employee eligible for the benefit? And there are differences in what they're eligible for. With FMLA, it's going to have to be number of hours worked and whether you've been there for a year in the last 7 years. Under ADA, if you're a qualified individual with a disability, and under workers' comp, it's an on-the-job injury. So we're starting by taking a look at the eligibility. It often gets confused with whether you're paid or not. Just because you have a mechanism to pay an employee doesn't mean that is part of their eligibility. That has to do with how they're getting paid when they're on this protected leave. So what is rollback, what worked, and what is the time required to work to be eligible? So one is your normal work week that we base the benefit of FMLA on. What are those 12 weeks going to equal if we have more than a 40-hour work week? Because we know if they work 40 hours, it's 480 hours. But what is it if it's 35? What if it's at 55? It's going to be that times 12. So your normal work week is a very important number, and it can change with leave usage beyond FMLA. So with FMLA, though, you have to have shown that you've actually worked, that you worked 1,250 hours. And if you don't know whether they're eligible or not, because of course, if they've worked part-time, 26 hours a week or more in the last year, I'm pretty confident that equals a 1,250. If they've worked 40 hours a week in the first 6 months, you're also going to get there. So you know pretty quickly whether they worked or not. It's when they've taken leave that it becomes challenging. So what you do is you go back and you roll back 1 year from the date that they want to take the leave, and you add up the actual time that the employee worked. Vacation, sick leave, holidays are not work days. So we're really saying, hey, if you're going to get eligibility for FMLA, you've got to show that you've worked at least 26 hours a week in the last year to get this kind of a very large 3-month benefit that protects your job and protects your medical benefits. So that's the first criteria we're looking at. The second criteria is, what is your normal work week? Well, even when you read the definition, it's a little confusing. It can include scheduled hours, even if they're not worked, because it's your normal work week. Because it's about what the employee was expected to work, not just the actual hours. Okay, I buy that. That's good. But if you're not working your normal work week that you're expected to work all year long because you've taken so much leave, it's not your normal work week anymore, folks. So the way that we have always done this, and I've been doing it this way for 30 years, I looked to see if I could find any case law on it. I'm not an attorney, so that's not normally what I would be doing anyway, but I'm certainly interested in anybody's opinion or feedback if they have it nationally on how they've seen this be handled. But the real question is, what happens if you take FMLA leave in the year preceding the next annual leave calculation period to determine the new hours? Okay, and I'm going to slow down a little bit so I can just show you what that transition is. What that means is when you're on FMLA, you're taking weeks and days off of work. And maybe even hours. You could have a reduced work schedule with FMLA. You could be working in the morning and not in the afternoon with FMLA. You could take 2 days off a week with FMLA. You could take 2 hours a day, 3 times a week with FMLA. You got all of these things you can do with FMLA. But once FMLA has exhausted, that's no longer protected normal work week time. And what we have been doing is when the leave exceeds the 3 months of FMLA, it's the leave time after that, such as leave under Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act or ADA, because you're taking leave because of that. And I would imagine there's going to be a challenge with Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act potentially because it's a different kind of protection. But we're talking about then when FMLA ends and you are still needing leave for your ongoing medical condition, as opposed to a pregnancy that is going to have an end date, then it's impacting your normal work week because you not only have taken 480 potentially days off, all hours off already, you're talking about taking another 40 per week off, continuing. So we will take the time after the FMLA has ended and not include time off in that normal work week. And what that does for you, everybody, is when you have people who have chronic conditions that are perpetual and they're going to need this leave every year, and maybe they always take 479 hours, not 480. So you're seeing a usage of leave that seems it's too predictable. How could you always have 479 hours and never reach 480? So it helps us examine those kinds of trends and look and see if we want to evaluate under curing and second opinion whether there might be some misuse. But it's more talking about when these chronic medical challenges occur and they exceed that 12 weeks or those 480 hours in intermittent reduced scheduled leave, the time they're taking after that, we don't include in their normal work week because their normal work week has now changed because they're asking for an ongoing leave benefit that is changing what they normally do every week. So what we're looking now is maybe a shorter work week, and on average, they're working 35 hours a week. I'd have to do the math to play with it a little bit, but it would be 2 months of leave potentially, maybe 320 hours of leave, depending on how much they take, that you would then be deducting from their normal work week schedule, and that would be your new normal work week. Am I clear enough with that, Maddie, before I end out? Does anybody have any questions that I can clarify before we stop the recording? Was that clear enough, everyone?
I felt like it was, but
Yep.
I also work with you, so it
Yeah,
might
we've been doing
makes more sense.
So Brooke, did you understand that?
Basically, what you're saying is if somebody's on FMLA and then they go out on ADA leave, those hours next year when we go to do the look back period, they're not going to count worked hours so that they're not going to have another 480 hours of FMLA.
Right, because their normal work week is impacted by the excessive leave beyond FMLA.
I kind of think I get it.
And I'm going to say that again, Maddie, so she can add that. So what we're really talking about is your normal work week gets modified when you've taken not excessive leave because you're eligible for FMLA, but 12 weeks is a lot of time to call it a full-time job. But we do that because we're protecting you under FMLA. But if you're going to need more than your 3 months of protected leave a year, you're no longer doing your normal work week. You've got a new work week. And that's what we're really focused on, is making sure we count those hours of eligibility. If you work more than 40 because you're exempt, we're going to do 50 times 12 and make sure you get every day of that benefit. But we're not going to create permanent part-time employees who exceed FMLA usage for a full-time job. We're going to find a way to identify whether they really can be a qualified individual with a disability over time as they need more and more time. That's the concept when you have that kind of usage. So I hope that was helpful for everybody.